Hi, everyone. Good morning. It is another month. I think I wrote April for the first time this morning. I don't know how I got through this week without any paperwork. Uh, just doing my final little adjustments here. Good morning for everyone all over. I can see you in the comments. I wish I say this every month, but I really wish I had a map that I could put a pincushion in for where everybody has come from. I just love that. We've got Ango here from Malaysia. Good to see you. When I interviewed Amira, I had no idea there was a quilting community in Malaysia that was so strong and vibrant. It's good to see you here. Um, did I did I do 2020? Did I make that mistake? Oh, Laura, Lori, thanks for letting me know. Anyways, hello from Germany. I've got Hex. Do you pronounce it Hexy or Hex? Fort Worth, Texas, California, Weddington, North Carolina, Warren, Michigan. That's just across the border there. You get the weather just a couple of hours before we do. Charlotte from Oklahoma. Glad to see you here. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. I know people have added some questions already on Instagram and on Facebook in the comments previously, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. And we're going to, one of my favorite people, Raven Smoke Dancer, Jessie, she's in Arizona, and she has asked me, how do you avoid puckering with Y seams? Now, Y seams are where three seams come together, and it is not a beginner move. It is an advanced technique. So before you attempt doing a Y seam or a mitered corner, be sure that you know your be sure that you've been quilting for a little while so that this is just not a bridge too far for you. Make sure you're able to sew straight. And before you do the Y seam, if you're doing a mitered corner, just ask first, why are you doing a mitered corner? Because, sorry, I've got friends here chatting. Why? Because sometimes once you get it all quilted, doing a mitered corner on a quilt can often be just too much work. The times when I do a mitered corner on a quilt is when I have a directional element that putting that corner adds some dynamic to the quilt. So sometimes with stripes or a very stripy like pattern will do that. Or maybe I'm centering something. But I have done them many times, and after I got it quilted, thought this wasn't worth all the effort, plus the wastage on the fabric. It produces scraps. So getting that out of the way, how do you avoid a pucker? And it's just about accuracy. You need to be sure that you're square. You need to know where your point is, and then you need to manipulate the fabric. And unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate that on a Q&A. It's about manipulation of the fabric. It's about patience and, just knowing where your marks are. So I guess that is a special request from you, Jessie, and I'm going to have to do a video on it. So, yeah, stay tuned. Donnie K. Quilts has asked, what is my current scrap crumb project? I just finished off my quilty strips. So I'm actually not actively putting my crumbs into anything. But I do have tons of them. So I think my next scrappy project is actually going to be with scrap strips. And I am going to be making a quilt as you go quilt. I think that's going to be my next one. I'm also seriously thinking of this year's 100 Days, 100 Quilt, 100 Blocks project, I think I might be making that from my solid scraps. Trying to use, going totally out of my comfort zone but doing strong contrast with white, black, and then those bold colors in those blocks. So that's my ideas. Still thinking about 100 days, 100 blocks for this year because I keep moving around. I thought maybe I'd do another Tula one, but I've just finished a Tula fabric quilt, and I've got one more that I'm just going to finish. So I think I'll be Tula out by the time 100 day, 100 blocks comes around. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my solids. The creative Mother's K, I think it is. The creative Mrs. K, sorry. As a young mom and sewist, she's finding it hard to find the time to work on projects. She already knows about the timer method. Do I have any other advice? Should she just wait until the kids are older? Well, the big problem for mothers of children of practically any age, but especially when they're young and at home, is that their demands are always changing. You know, you get into, you think, oh, I've got a toddler, I've got this handled, but then the toddler turns into a 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old turns into a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old, and on until high school. And every single year, your time management changes. So you're always in that flux, and you probably also don't have the luxury of a lot of space in your home that you can devote to sewing. And add in the extra thing, especially when you have small kids, is the safety element. So it's hard. It's hard. So you've got to give yourself a break. Doing big marathon projects may not be the time. Or you've got to think about projects that you can compact so that you can take them out and bring them, work on them, and then tidy them up and put them away when they're not being used. But I don't want you to think that you cannot do it at all, because as a young parent, you are, with so many demands on you, you need to have some time that you can carve out to fill your bucket back out, because you're giving so much of yourself away in so many different directions. You're giving it to your children. You're probably working on your relationship with your partner. You've got a job to do, often outside the home. So you do need those projects to fill you back up again. And if you're an introvert, even more necessary to have those projects. So think about a project that you can put into a box. Maybe you cannot do the big, if you don't have the space, you can't do the big quilt because you don't have the time and the space to lay that out, but you can certainly do hand projects. I know myself, as a young mother, I made embroidered stockings for every one of my children. I did cross stitch. There was pretty well almost the only time I got out my sewing machine was to do mending or to make Halloween costumes or school costumes. That was all the time I had. So I think the important thing is just realistically looking at your time and then fitting your project into that time. And very soon, faster than you'll ever believe it, you will have plenty of time. They will move out and they will not want you around, and you'll have plenty of time to make those quilts. So yeah, best of luck. Janet 57702 has asked, what's your thoughts on using muslin as backing? Why not? Why not? I mean, you'll get a solid look, but I'm sure my friend Joanne, if she's here, saying, well, you can dye that. You can dye that and make it any color you want. So muslin is perfectly fine, especially if you like a neutral palette. When there's a whole school of thought that you should never waste any money on the back of a quilt. You should just be using old sheets and scraps and things like that. making a beautiful backing is something that's fairly new, but do what you have. Do what makes sense to you. If you've got a bolt of muslin and you want to do it, do it. You can always piece that backing. You can use a lot of muslin and then put in orphan blocks in the back to make it more decorative, or you can applique on top of the back. Yeah, if you've got it, use it. Cheesehead quilter. I love that. Cheesehead quilter. In a recent video, you talked about a little tug on the bias when fabric isn't straight. Any other ideas? I'm trying to cut strips of plaid and it just curves close to the selvage edge. That is one issue with grain, is when it goes off grain, it doesn't go off necessarily in a nice straight line. There's a curve to it, and there's many fabrics where you'll find a tighter curve closer to the selvage because the selvage is stronger, so there was more resistance there. But there's nothing you can do to straighten a print that's been printed off grain. You can make a call as to whether to follow the pattern or to follow the grain. But if it's a print, there's nothing you can do. And I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about because I have received fabric where not only is it printed off grain, but there's a twist to the pattern. The pattern's not even straight. There's that twist right at the selvage. And unfortunately, there is nothing you can do. We've all been there. Just trim it off and put it into your scrap bin and use it in scrap blocks or practice pieces or whatever. Yeah. Often those things end up in the sale bin and we get attracted to them because they're on sale. And then you realize once you get home and you're working with it, this is why it was in the sale bin. Yeah. Quilt so simple. Do you ever bang yourself from looking at other YouTube tutorials or patterns because you feel overwhelmed at how little time you have to make everything you want to make? How do you overcome that low point? Well, I think you're a type of person that probably just needs to be reassured that your outcome will be good. You are so much more comfortable when you feel that you've covered all the variables and you're making the right choices in everything so that at the end game, your results will be good. It's hard to go against your own human nature, but try and access the warrior in you that can just go forward, and you've got to just trust in the process and just realize so much will be forgiven once you get the binding on. Quilting is a learning process. This past week, I have just been working on a UFO from 2018. Now, that's 4 years ago. And I would not have said that I have improved that much since 2018. But looking at those blocks, it's just amazing how far I have come in that time. And I thought I had already come a long way up to 2018. But every single quilt, you learn more. Every single project, there is more to learn. And I don't think that's ever going to stop. I don't think and I think that's part of the thrill, at least for me, in quilting, is there's always something new to learn. And you just have to let go. And you've just got to realize that you're a beginner, or you're just not a master yet. And when you become a master, you realize there's masters of masters. So there's always more to learn. And just think of it as you're working on your black belt. You don't even know what you don't know yet. So the idea of controlling all those variables is just a fallacy. You're never going to know enough to make your first, second, even your 10th quilt perfect. you're just always learning. So you just got to let go and know that other people have been in your spot. They've felt the very same thing that you have felt, and they have gone on. So just trust in the process, and remember, so much will be forgiven once you get the binding on. IHTTCUWP. I don't even know what that means. She would be really interested in hearing my opinion on the best way to join quilt blocks together so that they look even and square. Do you sew them together horizontally first or vertically? Well, that's actually what this week's video is on, and it will be coming out later today. I needed a quilt, somebody to hold up the quilt for me, and it was pouring rain yesterday, so I couldn't get that shot for the video. So it's me putting together an old quilting project, my 100 Days, 100 Blocks from 2018, and I've used stashing to put it all together and keep it all square. So yeah, stay tuned. Boy, I'm looking at all these people. Rainy Day Diva. Oh, I like that name. Sorry, muslin. Yes, muslin, not Muslim. Okay, Colleen Armstrong has asked, I'm a new quilter. Do you have to top stitch the flimsy to the quilt sandwich for free motion quilting on a domestic sewing machine? No, you don't need to top stitch the flimsy, but I have always found it better just to stitch one side of the flimsy down for free motion quilting. The way that I'm moving my fabric, if I start here and I move it, if I'm coming this way, I will do the top one. And that just stops the fabric from shifting. No matter how well I have glued it down, I always find it shifts. It's just the momentum and the pressure of the walking foot, and it's just those three layers are just shearing together. So yes, I always do one side. I know that there are people that do more basting than that, and I think if I had done more free motion quilting before I got my long arm, I probably would have done some broad stroke basting when it was really critical to keep things lined up. I often found, just that shift happening. There was a shear that was happening in certain designs, and yeah, basting, anything that you want to take out, just do some big broad stroke basting. I know that I have a friend who does hand basting. I should say she does hand quilting, and she sends her quilt tops out to a long armor just to do some broad stroke basting throughout the whole thing before she does her hand quilting. So yeah, do your basting. If you feel that you need more, do more. I took a class with Jackie Gehring, and she had a quilt with a lot of geometric elements that had been cut on the bias. And before she did, she's famous. She's written 2 books on using your walking foot with very straight line quilting, and she definitely basted that some of those elements before she did it, just so it didn't shift. Yep. Lindsay, Strigley, I hope I haven't butchered that. Do I prefer to finish your binding with the machine or hand stitch? And if I hand stitch, do you use a double thread? It's almost always the purpose of what I'm doing with my binding. Like if I'm making a charity quilt, I'm almost always machine binding it. If I know the person that it's going to, I will almost always hand quilt it. Now I say almost always because I often like contrasting. Like when I machine stitch, I sew it to the back and flip it to the top, And I like to do a color thread when I machine bind, just to give a little bit of contrast. So there's times that I've given away quilts where I've done it that way just so I could have that extra design element in it. So I'm actually, the quilt that I'm talking about today, next week when I do it, I will be machine binding it just because I want that design element. So I almost always, again, I like hand stitching the binding on. It's almost a period where I'm saying goodbye to the quilt because it's going away. I'm giving it away. I want the recipient to know that I care enough about them that I'm taking the time to hand stitch it. But it's just also a goodbye. But that's just me. That's just me and my time that's available to me. When I hand stitch it, I use a double thread. And I use a 50 weight thread. Lawrence has said, my goal this year is to improve my precision piecing. Does any method exist in quilting that you can follow, just like in music, exercises, and things to practice? Unfortunately not, but I do have a number of videos on scrap blocks, and that is what I use to practice stitching. You need to practice straight stitching, you need to practice how to cut straight, and of course the ironing. That's your foundation. Those three things are your foundation. And every day with every project, I make a lot of these scrap sampler blocks, and it's just practicing those basic skills. And you'll be amazed at how much things improve once you nail those three down. Lawrence also has asked, for scrap management, you often say to shop your stash or something like that. I wonder, do you plan your scrap projects? Do you choose the pattern first, or do you choose a pile of scraps you want to use and find a pattern to use them? I do both. Both of them work. It depends on the time, the day, inspiration. I find playing with my fabric very inspirational. You know, it's triggering lots of ideas, and oh, I could do this, or I could do that, or a scrap stashbuster, or whatever comes out of it. The trick is to curate those ideas. Not every idea you have you need to make. Sometimes they're just delicious trips to go down temporarily, and then you fold up your fabric and you just put it back into your stash. And I actually usually do that once a year. When I do the UFO challenge, that's where I go into all these piles that I've made through the year. Oh, I had that idea and that idea and that idea. Am I going to make any of those, or are they, or was that just a passing thing? So, yeah, you can go at it both ways. You can see an idea and then bring out your scraps to work there, or dig into your scraps and play with them and see what comes out of them. So both work. I'm just going to just say a hi to John from RD's Quilting Company. Just finished my owl, just about to work on my narwhal. I've really enjoyed, really found a big difference when I made my design walls with the pillowcases. These beautiful blocks that John designs, the various animals, and he's just done a really beautiful quilt pattern. I think it's red pandas. I'm not sure if you've got a cute name for that, John, or not. But I find with all that, there's so many little pieces in them. I find that pillowcase design wall just the perfect size to lay out all those little pieces and put them all together. And they can just sit there until I'm ready, and I don't have any pressure to get them all done at once. I can just leave them on the pillowcase design wall and do them when I have the time. Maria from Switzerland. She wants to quilt her HST top making Stitch in the Ditch. What color do I use? Well, it's not so much the color as the weight. Uh, I don't know what your HST colors are. Uh, Stitching in the ditch is a lot, excuse me, a lot more difficult than you think it is. You think you're just straight line quilting and you're going to hide your stitches. It is challenging, and I do not recommend it for beginners. It is much better or easier or more manageable to do it just a quarter of an inch or an eighth of an inch away from that fold line. And that just gives you a little bit of wiggle room, and you don't go through that intersection where all those HSTs meet. It's just a little bit easier to do. But if you do want to do it, go down in your weight, in your stitching, in your thread. Choose a 60 weight thread, not a 50, not a 40. And if you've got a really multicolored design, go for something desaturated. So either a gray or a taupe. You'll probably have to lay out a couple just to get them, but with the smaller stitch, with the smaller weight thread in your ditch, hopefully it will just disappear. Amy, I have a favorite ruler. Do I have a favorite ruler? I love anything from Creative Grids. My favorite ruler right at the moment is a 2.5 by 18. But I've just misplaced it. I've got to figure out where I put it. I also was using a very short Creative Grids 2.5 inch by, I think it was 6 inch, but just really, it depends on the project that you're working on. But I find that 2.5 by 18 really helpful. It does the bias on some bigger blocks. It just fits in my hand really nicely. I work a lot with 2.5 inch sizes, so it's great for binding. And yeah, that's my favorite one right at the moment. I don't have a favorite square one, but recommend that you use have a square that's the same size as the blocks that you're working on. You know, you accumulate as you're making them. Like if you're working on a 6.5 inch block, have a 6.5 inch ruler, and it just makes squaring them up so much easier. Angie gifted me an 8.5 one last year while we were doing the challenge for her kinship block, and just not having to shift that ruler around really helped. For doing angles and things like that, I usually use the marks on my rotary on my cutting mat. I haven't gone out and got a specialty ruler for that. But again, if you're doing lots of them, a ruler is good. A ruler is good. So choose what you like to do and find the thing that works best with you. The ruler that I recommend everybody start with, of course, is that 6 inch by 24 inch, but eventually you will evolve into other rulers based on what you're doing. D. Doling has asked, when 4 pieces come together at a point, how do you spin the points to reduce the thickness at that intersection? It's called spinning the seams. And I don't have a block here, but I'm pretty sure I covered it in one of my quilt coach videos of how to spin that center seam. There's a couple of threads on that have to be removed, and then you can spin it. Yeah, it's really hard to describe, but take a check. I think it's in Quilt Coach number 4, but I'm not positive. Just check that playlist. Okay. Oh boy. Lots of people here. Thank you, everyone. Any recommendations for the best cutting mat? Barbara Fraser has asked. I did a whole video on cutting mats, how to clean them and everything. That was I guess it was last month I did cutting mat video. The best one is one that fits your space, right? And the one that you can afford. Cutting mats are not cheap. I use but I have, the one that I have on my table is the 24 by 36 inch Olfa mat. I've had it for well over 10 years. So that's the one I use. But you may not have enough space for that. You may not only have enough space for the 18 by 24. Or you may have the luxury of being able to go out and use one of the big, I think she said the big one was 70 inches. It had clips that kept it together. Yeah, so I know there's those big white ones. Those are made out of polyurethane, but they are not, they have no give they don't have the same amount of give in them. Now, there's people out there that have them and swear by them, but they really are not self-healing cutting mats. You can nick them and they'll become rough over time. So look for those PVC green ones. They come in a couple of different colors. The video that I did went into all the different points: the 3 layers, the 5 layer, the 1.5 millimeter, the 1.5 millimeter versus the 3 millimeter, and make your choices from that. Yeah. Robin Schmidt has said, your Stashbuster number 3 quilt is my go-to baby quilt if I need to get something done. I was thinking of enlarging the length to make the top 9 inches. Is that possible to do? The sides are still 4. Yes, that's totally possible. Don't hesitate to do that. Modify it to make it work the way that you want it to work. I just made it. What did I do? Yeah, just do what you need to do. Making it out of scraps, making it out of another border. Yeah. Candy Gill, are there any books on color that you particularly like? I love the Secret Lives of Color by Cassia Sinclair. Now that's more about talking about colors and where they came from. If you're talking about color theory, the biggest problem with color theory and quilting is that so many of the books are written from the point of view of oil painting and a place where you can mix colors. In quilting, we cannot do that. We've got the colors of the fabrics that are made out there, and we have to choose our make our choices based on availability and not what we necessarily desire. So that is challenging. I have actually never used a quilting color book just because it just never seemed to work for me. So unfortunately, no, I do not have a recommendation on a color book for quilters, but I do recommend that 3-in-1 color tool. Brandy could probably put the link just to help you with recognizing the different colors. And I do have that download on the website and the color theory series, the playlist that you can download from the website too. Yeah. Rebecca has asked, I spend too much time figuring out how to cut out the fabric out of fat quarters so as not to have useless scraps. Why don't designers have cutout instructions to avoid waste? Well, part of it is workload. Because there's so many different ways of buying fabric. Some people choose to work from yardage. Some people choose to work from fat quarters. Some people choose to work from layer cakes. There's just so much. But wastage, I don't think has really been one of the critical factors in people designing quilts. It's never been listed as one of the things to design for. But that's one of the things I do my stash busters with. I have them designed so that you have the least amount of scraps possible. But the strategy that you need to have is what you do with your scraps. You need to have a plan afterwards to where are they going to go? Are you going to make scrap sampler blocks? Are you going to make scrap strip blocks? Where are they going? Yeah. So that's why when you think about it, fabric manufacturers really don't have an incentive for you to use as little fabric or use fabric as efficiently as possible. Their end game is for you to buy as much as possible. So fabric designers, not fabric designers, but fabric manufacturers and the designers that work for them just don't have that as one of their critical things. Yeah. Jenny, I love the look of walking foot waves. When stopping and starting with the needle down, the stitch shifted, resulting in choppy lines. Any tips for smoother lines? Can it be done in quadrants? Huh. I don't know how that happened for you. Maybe you can send me a picture and I could take a look at it and see what your problem is. But just need a little bit more detail to answer that question. Bernadette has asked, what recommendations do you have for starting ruler work with low shank machines? What kind of rulers are most useful? I am not the best person to be talking to you about that. I did have a lecture. My Toronto Modern Guild had a lecture this month from Silly Moon Quilting, and they make rulers and they do a lot of ruler work. They have a lot of experience doing ruler work on sit-down machines as well as long arm machines, and she's got a lot of pointers, so I would head over there and talk to her. Yeah. Looking at you guys are all having great conversations with one another. That is just amazing. I just love that. And people are here every month and they recognize other people from here. So that's just lovely. Amy has said, I struggle with my scrap blocks not looking like the color vomit. Well, there is, you know, it's funny with scrap blocks and how, you know, they can look like one hot mess. And I struggle with that because I really do like playing and playing and playing with them. But then at the end of the day, I do like a little bit of structure. So one thing that I try when I'm working on scrap projects is to have one fabric that I repeat more than the others. Or maybe a feature that I use consistently. So maybe it's just a straight line in the middle of the block and then everything else off the block is scrappy. Maybe it is how I connect the blocks. I'll use one fabric of one particular type to pull them all together. But I do find I just need just one more little kind of structural element in there, just to pull it all together and give your place a place for your eye to rest. Cindy has asked, hello from Edmonton. Have you ever struggled putting a quilt together that you just don't like? I think there's always, I've never finished a quilt and said, I absolutely hate this. But there are many times during the quilt where I go, I just hate this. I find the quilt for me gets uglier and uglier and uglier as I work along it. I just see so many, you're just looking at frame fabric and you're looking at seams that don't go together and you're very doubtful of the end. But once it gets all together and the binding comes on, so much of it just calms down and it coalesces into a design. There could be some things that you made a mistake on at the beginning. Maybe you chose fabric not as well as you should. If you do not want to be finishing a project, stop. You know, life is too short to be working on things that you absolutely despise. If they are projects for somebody else, if you're working in a color zone that is not yours and doesn't support you, only work on it in short bursts. If you are really working on something that is draining your energy, don't give it 100% of your time. Just give it a fraction of your time. I have made many quilts where all I could do is 15 or 30 minutes at a time, just because it was just so out of my comfort zone. But I've never made it to the end and said, I hated this quilt. It's just phenomenal, the quilts that I have passionately hated right up to the end. And then once that binding goes on, suddenly all that goes away. So I hope that's the same for you. Lucy has asked, she loves my stashbuster quilts. Do I have any plans for a new pattern? I constantly have new ideas. It's the challenge of time and getting them together. So definitely have many in the works. And yeah, there'll be another one coming. So I'm just going to take a moment here just to talk about just a couple of the last videos that I've done. Of course, there's turning scraps into binding. This is another really good thing to do at the end of your project. How you can use up those scraps. Maybe you can put them into your binding. Then there was my design board. I talked about the one that I made out of pillowcases, but I've got a beautiful big one on the wall. All the 7 ones are designed to be put up or taken down. And then, of course, frame fabrics. The fray. Is there anything more frustrating? I also had on the show, I had Suzanne Paquette on Karen's Quilt Circle, and we were talking about modern memory quilts. Suzanne has a wonderful way of thought process, working through making really beautiful modern quilts with important fabrics that hold many memories. And then, of course, I had Yvonne Busdeker from OFA, and we were talking about cutting mats and rotary cutters. And my new favorite tool is the pinking blade. And on Monday, I am going to have Youngmin Lee, and we will be talking about bujagi. And let me just go here, turn these all off. And of course, I think if you're still, I am going on a cruise to Alaska in May. We've got a pretty full ship now. Not the ship full, but the cruise is full. I think there's a couple of spaces for a couple more people. So if you've been thinking about it and you're not sure, request a brochure or ask a question and join us. It is a 7-day cruise. We're going up the coast from Vancouver to Seaward, and then we're going to be having a lot of fun. We've had a couple of stitch and chats with the participants and cannot wait to go. And then, of course, my next YouTube Live is tentatively booked for May 3rd, Tuesday, May 3rd. I want to thank Brandy in the background for helping me with this Q&A. She is instrumental. Unfortunately, she was sick this week, so we didn't have it on our regular Tuesday, and we've had it on Saturday. So always thankful for all her help. And I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. Lisa Roper has asked, when the quilt is done, do I wash it and dry it right away? No, No, I do a very thorough thread removal. I brush it thoroughly with a thread catcher, and then I gift it. I don't wash it. Yeah. Jennifer has said, is it strange that I use a flip finish for my quilts? I'm not familiar with that term, flip finish. Trudy has asked, do I store my scraps by color and size? Store your scraps the way that you use them. So I have all my scrap strips in a bucket. You know, they're just in their own ones. We're talking about my scrappy scraps. I process all my scraps into 2.5 inch or 5 inch strips, and they are in one place, and I turn those into scrap sampler blocks. Then I have the strips that are smaller than 2.5 inch, and those strips go into that bucket. And then I have crumbs, and I have those in a bucket. However, I use my solid scraps quite differently. I store them by color. I have 8 buckets, so I have the 6 primary and secondary colors, and then I have a white and a black. And that is what I do with my scraps. But that works for me because that's the way my brain works. So do however you want to do it. That's the important thing, is do it how you process it. And you want it simple enough so that you will do it, and you want it accessible so as well that you'll do it. And the trick is just to keep those scraps flowing through, because you are going to make scraps with every single project. You don't want to be accumulating them. If you've got 9 garbage bags filled with scraps in your sewing room, they are taking up too much space. You are not either consuming them fast enough, or you just need to give some of those away, or you're keeping the wrong sizes. So just always have some scrap projects around so that you can be consuming your scraps, and then store them in a way that gives you that flow and that accessibility. Yeah. And I'm just going to answer the last question here from Nina Peters, has asked, she loves listening to podcasts while quilting. What do I listen to? I do a couple of things. I have an iPad stand. Everybody loves my iPad stand. It's right above my sewing machine. So sometimes I watch videos. Sometimes I watch Skillshare videos. Sometimes I listen to audiobooks. And this past week, I have consumed an old Stephen King book called The Duma Key, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So yeah, that's what I listen to while I do my sewing. And sometimes I have nothing. Sometimes my brain is just so full. I just need peace and quiet. So yeah. So thank you everyone for showing up. There are lots and lots of comments and conversations going on in the chat. I wish I could leave it open so you guys could continue talking to each other, but thank you all for showing up today. There will be a video later today. My daughter's coming over. I'm going to get her to hold up this quilt top so I can get that final shot in the video and up and live. So take care. And let me see what else is there. Yeah. So yeah. So take care, and I will see you next time.